this alternate universe, a mysterious corruption has begun to spread throughout the circus, transforming both its inhabitants and the NPCs themselves into terrifying creatures. With Caine out of control and most of their friends turned into monsters, Pomni, Ragatha, and Kinger will have to traverse a circus plunged into darkness, while trying to escape from what were once their companions. However, this is not a story of hope, because in this world, no one is safe, and every attempt to survive only brings them closer to a much crueler fate. So join me in discovering TADC, the Forbidden Version, one of the darkest and most disturbing alternate universes of the Amazing Digital Circus. We start with the first image, where we see Kinger loading a shotgun while a terrified Pomni runs behind him. This scene seems to reference the third episode of the Amazing Digital Circus, The Mystery of the Mildenhall Manor, where Kinger found a shotgun and escorted Pomni through the most dangerous part of the mansion. Everything around them is pitch black and completely submerged in darkness. We can barely make out the characters and the creature chasing them, while the rest of the setting remains hidden in the shadows. However, this could explain why Kinger doesn't seem afraid. As we discovered in the series, when he's in the dark, he temporarily regains his lucidity. For this reason, Kinger isn't fleeing desperately like Pomni, and instead remains calm as he prepares to face the monster head-on, a creature that looks like it was dragged straight out of hell itself. This creature might have been created by Caine as an NPC, which is why it doesn't seem to be one of the circus's main characters. But if this AU presents it as a real threat, it's possible it managed to escape its original stage due to a glitch in the system. This opens up a rather terrifying possibility, that perhaps the boundaries between the adventures are disappearing and the circus is failing to function properly. But then, why is this monster chasing Kinger and Pomni? We finally arrive at the second panel, where we can see one of the circus staircases, which is likely the same one that appeared during the penultimate episode of the series. However, the most terrifying thing about the image isn't the background, but the creature standing on it. In front of us appears a completely distorted version of Caine, reminiscent of the bizarre transformation he underwent when he started losing control in the series. In this AU, his appearance is much more grotesque and terrifying, as his jaw has become gigantic and is full of razor-sharp teeth, while several eyes bulge out all over his body. We can also observe that his arms have transformed into a sort of extremely long and thin tentacles, each ending in deformed hands with claws capable of tearing apart any being that gets in his way. Furthermore, the absence of light makes the scene feel much darker, leading us to believe that Caine is no longer in control of the circus or his own body. Bubble didn't manage to escape this transformation either, as he now possesses exaggeratedly sharp teeth, bloodshot eyes, and a massive tongue hanging out of his mouth. Although he normally acts as Caine's little comedic assistant, here he has turned into a creature just as disturbing as he is. All this makes me theorize that the circus inhabitants are undergoing changes that are slowly turning them into these creatures. Perhaps it's a type of corruption even more dangerous than abstraction. Or maybe the system itself is warping their bodies and minds. Whatever happened to Caine seems to be one of the worst fates anyone could suffer in this AU, because if even the creator and controller of the adventures ended up turning into a monster, then there is probably no one left capable of keeping the circus under control. In this panel, we finally see the continuation of the first illustration, where Kinger is holding the shotgun and aiming directly at the monsters on the right while trying to protect Pomni and Ragatha. This is where the designs of other characters we hadn't yet seen turned into these creatures are finally revealed. Behind Ragatha, Pomni, and Kinger, we can make out Zubul, Jax, and Gangle, completely deformed. This seems to confirm that what happened to them was some kind of abstraction, although it's not the same one we know from the series, but rather a corrupted version that transforms the characters into much more disturbing beings. Zubul appears with an exaggeratedly wide open jaw full of sharp teeth and overly long arms that allow them to walk on all fours. Then we have one of the best designs, and probably the one most likely to cause nightmares, Jax. His eyes bulge out of his face while a massive amount of teeth covers his visage. camouflage. Just like Zubul, he moves on all fours, though his signature smile has now become one of the most terrifying elements of his design. Then we have Gangle, whose design was the hardest for me to figure out due to its bizarre shape. Even so, she looks incredibly terrifying, and her face seems to be partially powered down, as if the corruption had also affected her mask and her very energy. Right on her left side appears the creature we saw at the beginning, which at this point I can almost confirm is Gummigoo, albeit completely deformed just like the rest of the characters. We can also spot other previously seen designs, and we even see the sun turned into a creature just as terrifying as the rest. This proves that this corruption isn't only affecting the humans trapped in the circus, but also the characters created within this digital world. In the midst of all this chaos, we see Pomni running while Ragatha tries to follow her despite having lost an eye in one of her arms. Both seem completely exhausted, and I don't even want to imagine the sheer hell they had to go through to end up in such a state. Kinger is the only one who still dares to face these creatures head on, stepping in front of them and using the shotgun to protect the girls. This makes sense if we remember that the darkness allows him to regain his lucidity and act with greater confidence, as we saw in the series. However, even though Kinger seems determined to fight, the sheer number of monsters in front of them leaves them with very little chance of escape. Without a doubt, the fate awaiting our characters feels incredibly sad, because even if they survive this encounter, they will still have to figure out if there's any way to stop this corrupted abstraction before they end up turning into the very creatures they are now trying to flee from. Sadly, the next panel doesn't bring the good news one might hope for. In the next panel, one of the saddest scenes of this entire AU is revealed. Corrupted Jax has just torn Ragatha in half, while Pomni watches from a distance as her dear friend loses her life right in front of her. The most unsettling part is that Jax doesn't seem to be looking at Ragatha, but directly at us as viewers, as if trying to communicate that he knows exactly what he just did. The scene takes place near the circus bedrooms, where the few remaining characters apparently hid. Unfortunately, this did them no good, as one of these atrocities managed to find them and ended up taking the life of one of our favorite characters. We can also spot an open door behind them, which reinforces the idea that Pomni, Ragatha, and probably Kinger tried to take shelter in one of the rooms, believing it would be a safe place. However, something that really worries me is that Kinger is nowhere to be seen. This could mean he met an even worse fate, likely losing his life while trying to protect Pomni and Ragatha, just as we saw him doing in the previous illustration. Sadly, his sacrifice wouldn't have mounted to much, because even after trying to hold off the monsters, they still ended up finding the girls and killed Ragatha in a highly brutal manner. As in the rest of the illustrations, the dark background and low lighting make the image feel even more terrifying, while Pomni seems to head toward the exit completely alone. Escaping that spot doesn't mean she's safe though, as an immense horde of monsters is still waiting for her behind it. Her fate wasn't much different from the rest of the characters, as she was likely found by one of these creatures while trying to escape and unfortunately lost her life. Just like Ragatha, we see that Pomni was torn in half in a highly graphic illustration. Her eyes reflect all the pain and suffering she felt in her final moments, allowing us to imagine the sheer brutality of how it all happened. The one responsible for ending her life seems to be the corrupted version of Gangle. Each of her masks shows a different expression, though they all turn out to be equally terrifying and seem to show that they enjoyed what they did to Pomni. The dark background and low lighting make the scene even more disturbing, heightening the atmosphere of terror that surrounds this entire AU. Sadly, this story doesn't have a happy ending, as all our characters ended up losing. This goes to show that not all alternate universes end with hope or a chance to carry on. In this case, we simply witness a world where everyone was corrupted, and where there is no one left capable of escaping. There is no to be continued here, nor a happy ending. This is simply what happened. Although it hasn't been revealed yet what happened to Kinger, there is a small chance that he is still alive and in hiding, trying to find the cure. After all, this corruption bears a strong resemblance to an infection that slowly transforms the characters, albeit taken to a much more terrifying extreme than the original abstraction. What do you think? Did you like this AU, or will it give you nightmares? I'll be reading your thoughts in the comments.